You know, I don't always do bell ringers on Wednesday. Oh, wait, yes, I do. It's time for our daily bell ringer. Let's get psyched. It's Wednesday.
All right. Hey now.
Mr. Kovacs class. It's Mr. Kovacs class.
You might learn a ton.
It's Mr. Kovacs class.
It's interesting too.
It's Mr. Kovacs class.
And he's super cool.
It's Mr. Kovacs class.
So we're talking ecology. Ecology, it's like the rules for living on there. Yep, that's right, our planet, Earth. Earth. The big blue marble. Big blue planet, isn't it? It's a beaut. Only one like it that we know of. Well, we know of others like it. Only one we can tell has life on it. And we're talking about ecology, which is like the rules for life on planet Earth, like what organisms can live in what places, and the basics basically are what we're getting into. All right, let's look at a little ecology. First thing you have to remember is that organisms are dependent upon biotic and abiotic factors. So you need to know the difference between biotic and abiotic, right? They're the same word with the A in front of it for abiotic. That means not, right? Like atypical, not typical, right? Abiotic, not biotic. So it's pretty easy, but not biotic means not living, never was living things. And the two most important abiotic factors, as I mentioned in class yesterday and that we've seen, are temperature. Temperature is important because temperature drives chemical reactions done by enzymes. Enzymes, as we learned, work only in specific temperature ranges. Too cold and they slow down to a point where they can't sustain life on Earth. And too hot, they bend out of shape, they denature. And we did labs back in the beginning of the year where we proved that if you change the temperature, it'll change the way an enzyme worked. I think we used catalase enzyme to do that. All right. The other important factor is precipitation, or the amount of water. And really, there's a lot of things that go on with water, but not only the amount of available water, the amount of water that falls from the sky, the amount of water that's stored in the ecosystem, but also of that water, what is its pH? Again, chemical reactions need water to be in a certain pH. Most of the chemical reactions in our body, with a few exceptions, they like to happen right around a neutral pH. So pH of the water is important. Salinity, how much salt is in the water, right? What minerals are dissolved in the water, right? What is the relative humidity if there's no standing water? How much water is in the atmosphere? So those are abiotic factors. The biotic factors are all the living things that you interact with, both this visible and invisible, right? Like bacteria and protists and archaea are not easily seen, but they're very important parts of your ecosystem, parts of your habitat, right? They do different things. And then, of course, the fungus, plants, and animals are important because you might eat them, or they may want to eat you, or you might use their bodies for shelter, or you might use them for some other reason. That's biotic factors. So these two factors, biotic and abiotic, are the first things that you need to know. Then you have to understand, as ecologists, we look at different levels of organization, right? Ecologists aren't worried so much about the individual. They're worried about populations. That is, population ecologists worry about all of the members of the same species living in a given habitat. How do they interact with each other? How do they compete with each other, right? And then they worry about, okay, this population, how does it interact and compete with the other populations in its community, right? So how does the population interact with the other populations in a community? And of course, in a community, all these populations are dependent upon abiotic factors, which they find in their ecosystem. These are the available resources. They're in competition for these abiotic resources. And then if you get a large area of the same ecosystem, we call it a biome. And you probably remember biomes from middle school, where you learn about places like the tropical rainforest or the great grasslands or the tundra or the taiga or there's a whole bunch of biomes, which are large geographic regions of the same ecosystem. Okay? And so in ecology, we study things at all of these levels. How does populations interact with themselves? How do they interact with other populations? How do the populations interact with the abiotic factors in their ecosystem? Two words that were important for me to introduce you yesterday and we're reviewing on today's Bellringer, of course, is the word habitat. Habitat is pretty much where does that organism find its food, water, and shelter, right? It's livable space. Where does it do its business? Where does it find food? Where does it sleep? Where does it raise its family? That's its habitat. Okay, and we can generalize, but usually habitats have to have a specific amount of temperature, a specific amount of precipitation, right? Like for orangutan who lives in the tropical rainforest in Sumatra, they need to live in a place where it's rainy enough to support trees, right? And it's warm enough so that the trees can grow to be of immense size. So that's important, right? I mean, there are places where there's enough water to grow trees, but they don't grow because it's too cold, right? So habitat. And then finally, the last thing we touched on yesterday was this idea of a niche or niche. You can say niche. We know what you're talking about. Niche, right? Niche is the organism's role or what it does, like what is the business it does in its habitat? What is the business that it does in its habitat? What does it eat? Who does want to eat it? How does it interact with the abiotic factors and the other biotic factors? What's its role? When is it active? When is it not active? Where does it raise its young? How long does it raise its young for? These are all parts of the animal's or plant's niche, its role. Okay, so the words that you need to know by now are abiotic, biotic. You need to know population, community, ecosystem, biome, and you need to know habitat and niche. That looks like 8 terms that you should be familiar with by now. Bye now.